Our conferences between Oregon as a small yet notable state in regard to environmental advances in the US and our sister provinces of Fujian and Tianjin City in China are a guide for other states and countries because we are all working diligently to fight against the climate crisis and protect the environment, biodiversity, and ecology of our respective lands. When viewed together, we deliver an example of how all states, small and large, can work cooperatively to successfully fight climate change. Oregon's environmental legacy was fundamentally shaped by our third governor, Tom McCall, who championed a series of environmental laws during his 2 terms from 1967 to 1975. He was responsible for making all Oregon beaches public. He also signed into law the Oregon Forest Practices Act in 1971. In 1972, as a result of McCall's determined efforts, or passed the Bottle Bill, becoming the country to establish deposits for bottles. His fearlessness to go up against powerful industrial interests to protect Oregon's natural beauty, together with the efforts of the collective legislature, demonstrated that when leaders agree on the common good, the laws they pass are more effective. The story of Fujian and Tianjin, the story of their races, are closely tied to China's environmental legacy, which is a sweeping, large-scale effort for a united and determined population who, together with leaders they respect, have made a difference in restoring and protecting their lands. Beginning in 2000, China began building an ecological civilization as a national strategy, and by 2018 placed this mandate into its national constitution. China is the only government in the world that has made the objective of building an ecological civilization part of its national policy. From its decisions, China has proven that its political system is able to mobilize massive social forces to cope with the disasters brought on by climate change and further to rebuild and restore the environment of the country. In the respective histories of our 2 countries, the US and China underwent industrialization. This created a rise in wages for the people of both countries, along with healthcare, old age pensions, education, and advanced technology focused on making life better for each country's population. Through this developmental process, both nations have brought significant portions of their people out of poverty, and both have created a broad middle class. The downside of the rapid rise of industrialization, however, is that it caused environmental destruction and degradation of each country's natural resources: farmland, rivers, forests, lakes, reservoirs, wetlands, and coastlines. Each country's history of industrialization had different timeframes, with the US enjoying a significant volume of industrial production as early as 1898, while China's advances did not take hold until the first 5-year plan in 1953. Therefore, the time span of environmental damage for each country is different, but both countries have recognized that they not only must halt the destruction of their environments, but also they must put into place restoration and renewal strategies to repair the damage, such as cleaning up the rivers and soil while reconstructing the environment through cultivating new forests, wetlands, prairies, tidal marshes, barrier islands, to name a few. OCC President Jan, his overview to this forum, referred to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres's remarks, which were part of the Sustainable Development Goals report in July 2022. Guterres said, quote, We must rise higher to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals and stay true to our promise of a world of peace, dignity, and prosperity on a healthy planet, unquote. OCC has taken on responsibility to educate our stakeholders and all interested parties throughout Oregon about the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. It is key for Oregonians to understand what the SDGs are and why they are important to Oregon, the US, China, and the world. The SDGs are not only a set of goals, but an approach toward implementing processes in countries all over the planet to eradicate poverty, stop global warming, and establish sustainable communities along with other essential goals. Despite the fact that so few people in the US and subnational governments, such as Oregon, know little to nothing about the SDGs, our local communities, our farm workers, Native Americans, farmers, scientists, and local and regional organizations are coming together with county and state support to implement sustainable projects of all types and scales, even though they do not in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. The bottom line is that the people are working hard to find solutions, and they need the support of the SDGs and an informed population to ensure their efforts are successful. This is why our work with China is so urgent. We have identified the commonalities we share and built a relationship of friendship and cooperation for over a third of a century through our sister state efforts. OCC appreciates the time, effort, and seriousness of everyone who is working so hard to establish productive, mutually beneficial agreements and programs between our states. Thank you. Those are my opening remarks, and I would like to introduce our first speaker, scientific counselor Gao Pengfei from the Consulate General of the People's Republic of China in San Francisco. Counselor Gao, thank you. Welcome.
谢谢，这个很高兴参加今天我们第二阶段的会议。首先呢，我也表示一种对这个会议的第二阶段表示一种祝贺，也感谢我们这个中国理事会的这个蓝静主席和夏洛特这个副主席，还有各位专家、各位朋友们。其实呢，我更高兴的是呢，我们通过第一阶段会议之后呢，形成了许多共识，我想大家可能也都很了解。同时呢，我们第二阶段已经把好多共识付诸了这个实践阶段。比如说第一阶段，我们的张总领事，还有我们天津、福建的代表，以及这个我们蓝主席都共同提出来，我们应该把我们的这个论坛让更多的人受益，希望更多的这个地方加入到我们的论坛里面来，形成更多的共识。所以今天呢，我也很高兴的看到了这个我们参加第二阶段会议的代表就实现了我们第一阶段的一些建议，比如说我们有海南的同志加入我们的论坛，同时我们也有这个斯洛文尼亚的这个代表专家作为代表来发言，所以我相信这都是我们第一阶段论坛取得的一个阶段性的成果。所以因此呢，我也想表示对我们的会议呢这个阶段性的成果表示一种祝贺，这是我想表达的一个方面。另一方面呢，我也想这个作为我们第二阶段会议呢，我想我们更多的目标是聚焦在这个落实上面，聚焦在这个具体的这个务实合作上面。所以因此呢，我也想代表我们总领馆呢提出一些建议意见，也供大家这个参考。对，比如说我们也曾经多次提出过来，因为这个气变的问题是人类面临共同的问题，因此呢，我们感觉呢经过一段时间呢我们的交流和研讨，我们认为呢，我们应该基于在目前呢我们这个中方和这个俄勒冈在前面充分沟通的基础上，我们应该把我们在国家公园来应对气候变化中间的一些作用和研究一些应用，能够充分的这个展现出来，作为一个引领。我们提出是否可以我们启动一个国家公园在行动 这么一个计划，来去推动这个多方的这个国家公园，包括这个我们这个福建的武夷山国家公园，包括这个俄勒冈的火山口国家公园，还有各方面的这个国家公园都可以参加进来啊。通过国家公园之间在欺骗方面的一些行动，来去推动大家能够共同这个认识我们国家公园的在这个欺骗中间能发挥更好的作用，同时呢，推动我们的这个研究和合作。可以实现我们这个专家的这个和学者的这个互访合作研究，然后能够让企业能更紧密的合作起来因此呢，我们想呢，能够通过这个活动来促进一些可持续的一些发展期待的未来呢经过不断的努力呢，我们能够不断的取得新成果，引领这个全球这个在通过国家公园的方式，国家公园这种一个独特的这种平台来去促进全球应对气候变化，由此呢，让这个中美乃至全球能够受益，共建人类命运共同体。所以我相信呢，我们通过第2阶段的这个研讨之后呢，我们的目标、我们的合作方向、我们的合作意愿更加清晰，因此我们更期待的未来我们的合作成果更加丰富。再一次感谢大家，谢谢大家。
Thank you. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Zhang Hui Wang, Director in Scientific Research Monitoring Center of Uishan National Park. Welcome, Director Chan.
大家好，我的刚刚的朋友们，各位领导、各位同事，大家上午好，非常高兴参加这场会议。这边我先视频，我谨代表潍山国家公园管理局向俄勒冈州中国理事会举办此次会议所做的大量工作表示感谢。下面我就潍山区域气候变化事实预估和大家做个交流。气候变化是当今人类生存和发展面临的严峻挑战，是国际社会普遍关心的重大全球性问题。这个是我们2019年、2021年的潍山这个区域里面洪水灾难那个旱涝这个地方是今年的非常干旱的这个气候，我们这个在这边浇水。政府间气候变化专门委员会在最新发布的第6次评估报告，给我们这个全球气候变化观测事实。报告中指出，当代气候系统的变化范围广，速度快，有些变化数千年未有。以地表温度为例，20世纪70年代以来，全球地表温度处于快速增长期，升温趋势非常明显。2001到2020年这20年平均的全球地表温度较工业化水平前升高了0.9度。2021到2020年的10年期间，平均的全球地表温度已经上升了1.09度。2016到2020年是1985年以来最暖的5年。这个是我们的图里面的一些图表的趋势。那中国是受全球气候变化影响最敏感的区域之一。中国气候变化蓝皮书2002年指出，20世纪中期以来，中国地表年平均气温呈显著上升趋势，升温速率为每10年上升0.26度，高于全球同期的平均水平。平均年降水量呈增加趋势，每年平均增加5.5毫米，但区域间的差异非常明显。潍山国家公园地处中国东南沿海潍山脉的西北端， 其所在的区域的气候要素变化特征都十分明显的。根据潍山国家气象观测站的监测数据，1961年到2021年，潍山区域的年平均气温呈现显著上升趋势，升温速度为每10年 0.25 度。20世纪80年代中期以来，增温尤其明显。2000年以来，多数年份的年平均气温高于气候平均值。2019、2020、2021年是1961年以来最暖的3年，最高和最低气温同样呈现出增温的趋势，降水量的长期变化趋势没那么明显，只是略有增加，但年纪变率非常大。潍山区域的高温、强降水等极端天气气候等事件趋多趋强。根据我们这个调查情况、监测情况来看，以高温为例，2000年以来，年最高气温超过35度的日数平均增加17%，尤其最近5年的高温日数均超过40天，平均增加52%。1961年以来，年极端最高气温超过39度的仅8年，其中4年就出现在2000年以后。另外，再以这个强降水为例，强降水重点关注2类，一类是持续时间长有量的积累，一类是时短雨强大有量的集中。在我们潍山区域，根据我们这个气象观测数据统计结果表明，连续3天以上的暴雨过程，1961年以来仅发生15次，8次就出现在2000年以后。1小时降水量超过50毫米，3小时降水量超过80毫米的次数，1991年以来分别出现5次、7次，其中80%以上是出现在近10年。那我们现在的话是选取了9种常用的极端气候指数，对潍山区域未来的极端冷暖、旱涝情况进行预估。我们这选择的这个9个温度、降水、干旱这个里面的9个这个指数。然后相对于这个，根据我们多模型的预估表明，相对于1991到2021年，无论在中等排放情景还是高排放情景下，本世纪潍山区域的极端最高气温、极端最低气温、夏季日数、暖昼日数等指标的话明显增加，而且增幅随着时间的推移而加大。在高排放情景下，增幅量级。
So I'm in the middle of a China meeting.
表征降水量频次和强度在本世纪均增多增强。持续干燥日数的同样也增加，这表明未来可能出现极端降水、持续干旱的共同增加的状况。也就是说，极端旱涝事件的发生概率将显著增大。潍山区域的气候变化观测事实和未来气候预估都表明了气候风险正在还将不断加剧。我们非常希望将来能够与美国火山口湖国家公园等单位和部门切实开展全面合作，解决一些重要的问题，共同积极的应对气候变化。我们看到的朋友们，天津、福建的朋友们，潍山有着无与伦比的生态人文资源，是中华民族的骄傲。我们潍山国家公园是中国首批正式设立的5个国家公园之一，是中国唯一一个既是双遗产地，又是世界人与生物圈的保护区的国家公园。欢迎大家来潍山国家公园做客，期待在不久的将来能够在潍山与大家会面。谢谢大家。
Thank you. Thank you, Director John. Our next speaker is from Crater Lake National Park, Jennifer Hook, who is one of the botanists. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, can you see? Here we go. Okay, excellent. So thank you for allowing me to talk today about how Oregon, China, and Slovenia national parks can work together using research and education to address climate change issues. My name is Jen Hook, and I am the park botanist at Crater Lake National Park. We have been seeing, feeling, and dealing with the direct impacts of climate change at Crater Lake National Park. We are experiencing warmer temperatures, longer and more frequent drought episodes, and less of our precipitation coming in the form of rain versus snow. This leads to earlier snowmelt and shorter winter seasons, plus longer, hotter, and drier summers. The graph at the bottom right of the screen shows the decrease in annual snowfall received at Crater Lake headquarters. An 18% reduction has been recorded from 1950 to 2010. The most troubling ways these changes manifest themselves at Crater Lake National Park are in terms of changing disturbance regimes, especially an increase in large, high-severity fires and longer growing seasons. Climate change also threatens our at-risk species, including threatened species and their habitats. Climate change facilitates the introduction and spread of invasive species, which threaten the integrity and diversity of Crater Lake's natural resources. Climate change is directly impacting Crater Lake National Park's signature resource, the lake. In 2021, a nearshore filamentous algae bloom was documented for the first time. This coincided with the warmest lake surface temperature and lowest lake water level on record. This is both alarming and a call to action. These challenges present many opportunities for a research and education partnership to develop among Wuishan National Park, Crater Lake National Park, and Triglav National Park. Together, we can focus on 5 main areas to help park management mitigate the effects of climate change and transition to a more climate-friendly operations. 1, resource protection and conservation. 2, visitor use management. 3, economic sustainability of national parks and neighboring communities. Sorry, cat. 4, research, education, and outreach. And number 5, creating a model of effective land stewardship. There is a great need for and much to be gained from developing a strong partnership among the sister parks and their connected universities. Mutual high priority climate change related issues can be identified as research and education action items. The universities connected to the sister parks can engage in addressing research questions, identifying mitigations and solutions, and helping sister parks transition into climate-friendly modes of operations that ready them for the future. We can work together on the resource preservation and conservation goal by mitigating the effects of climate change on key resources. At Crater Lake, we are interested in conserving and restoring threatened species, such as bull trout, the northern spotted owl, and whitebark pine. These species are imperiled by invasive species and climate change impacts that directly threaten their existence within the park. Preliminary work has been conducted to restore habitat, plant disease-resistant trees, protect habitat from fire, and collect baseline inventory and monitoring data. But many more opportunities for research remain. We can collaborate on ways we can manage visitor use in the park, allowing for recreation and visitor enjoyment while protecting the iconic natural and cultural resources that oftentimes are becoming more vulnerable with climate change. We can work together to define levels of sustainable visitation, mitigate and restore damage from visitor use, and lessen visitor impacts within our parks. We can partner to investigate ways we can transition to a more sustainable economy with our partners and our gateway communities, encouraging climate-friendly tourism and transportation systems. At Crater Lake, this is a big challenge due to our remote location, harsh winters, and seasonal visitation trends. We can work together to expand our research and communicate our findings to the public, We can incorporate new and relevant technologies and education methods. We can partner to widen our outreach efforts to engage new generations of park visitors and supporters. And ideally, our partnership could model effective transitions to more climate-friendly and sustainable park management that can be replicated in other places. At Crater Lake National Park, we have a science and learning center that could provide support for research and education. This is located at park headquarters, where researchers and educators have access to park scientists and staff. The Science and Learning Center provides short-term office space and lodging for researchers and educators. It can serve as a springboard to facilitate hands-on research, learning, and outreach within Crater Lake National Park. We at Crater Lake National Park look forward to developing strong partnerships with our sister parks and connected universities. We are excited to create Jin Lan's vision of, quoting him, a mini ecosystem for research and learning in the context of climate change. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
That was great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It was good to hear from you. We're moving right along, and it's very exciting, all the different representatives we have here. We will hear now from the Hainan Tropical Rainforest National Park. Thank you for coming.
好，各位朋友，大家好。我是海南热带雨林国家公园管理局的李嘉玲，非常高兴能与大家一同关注生态，一同了解国家公园。在2021年10月12日举行的生物多样性缔约方大会第15次会议上，习近平总书记宣布，中国将建立第一批国家公园：三江源国家公园、武夷山国家公园、大熊猫国家公园、东北虎豹国家公园和海南热带雨林国家公园名列其中。2022年4月11日，习近平总书记视察到海南热带雨林国家公园时提出，海南热带雨林国家公园是水库、粮库、钱库、碳库。同时，他强调了海南热带雨林保护的重要性，以及生态保护、绿色发展和人民福祉要同步推进，力争实现全民共享。那么，海南热带雨林国家公园位于海南岛中南部，横跨五指山、琼中、白沙、昌江等9个市县，总面积是4269平方公里。这个面积约占海南岛陆地面积的1/7。其中，五指山、莺歌岭、猴迷岭、尖峰岭、霸王岭等著名的山体均在其范围内，所以被称之为海南之巅，也是海南的屋脊。五指山是海南的最高山峰，它也是海南的象征和地标。一曲我爱五指山，我爱万泉河，让我们五指山闻名中外。五指山位于海南岛的中部，形如手指而得名。其中第2峰是海南最高峰1867米。五指山是海南岛南北热量和东西水分的交汇处，这里集中分布着热带、亚热带及干湿地区生物多样性。因为它特殊的小气候，形成了我们非常丰富的生物多样性。那么，整个海南热带雨林国家公园可以用4最一保护一塔双遗产来概括。首先，我们热带雨林国家公园，它最低海拔是40余米，最高海拔1867米。 这里有着非常完整的垂直带谱。那么在我们的垂直的热带低地雨林、热带山地雨林、热带高山云雾林以及低海拔到高海拔都有分布的一些小面积的针叶林，这里形成了我们非常垂直的完整的垂直带谱。第二个最呢，就是我们拥有着保存最为完好的热带雨林。我们热带雨林国家公园的总面积是4269平方公里，其中森林面积占了4207.7平方公里，森林覆盖率约为95.85%，覆盖了海南岛95%以上的原始森林和55%以上的天然林。这里拥有着中国分布最为集中、最为完好、连片面积最大的热带雨林，是世界热带雨林的重要组成部分。这里具有着国家的代表性和全球重要的保护意义。这里拥有着我们连片面积最大的热带雨林，主要是以中部山区为主的五指山和莺歌岭为中心，面积约为250平方公里。这里也是中国唯一的世界少有的大陆性岛屿型热带雨林。在我们热带雨林中，它有着非常高的生物多样性。那么海南热带雨林国家公园是属于全球34个生物多样性热点地区之一，也是海南长臂猿唯一的分布地。我们记录了维管束野生植物3653种，其中国家一级保护7种，海南特有种419种，记录了露西脊椎野生动物540种，国家一级重点保护14种，海南特有24种，生物多样性指数高达6.28，与巴西亚马逊雨林相当。一塔指的就是我们热带雨林是海南的水塔，南渡江、昌化江、万泉河等海南的主要河流均发源于此，所以被称之为海南水塔。它不仅是重要的水源涵养库，也是重要的防风抗洪等生态屏障。在热带雨林国家公园中，我们常住的人口有2.43万人，主要是黎族和苗族，民风淳朴，文化独特，风情浓郁，黎苗歌舞异彩缤纷，黎族的纹身古老而神秘。这里有6万年前的人类遗址前铁洞、船形屋营造技术、黎族的歌舞，还有3月3等节庆，都被评为国家级非物质文化遗产保护名录。其中黎族的黎锦被联合国教科文组织选为首批急需保护的非物质文化遗产名录。在五指山有着清代冯子材留下的首辟南荒先展开云开，一手撑天等摩崖石刻。这里还有清代举人黎春及国民党专员所做的折木符日等摩崖石刻。海南热带雨林国家公园秉承着生态保护第一的理念，坚持绿水青山就是金山银山的理念，坚持山水林田湖草系统治理，保持自然生态系统原真性和完整性，保护生物多样性，保护生态安全屏障，为当代人提供优质的生态产品，给子孙后代留下了弥足珍贵的自然遗产，实现了国家所有、全民共享和世代传承。在五指山，我们有一个国家级森林生态系统定位观测研究站，有132个固定监测样地，还有132个野生动物监测点位。所以最后也欢迎大家到海南热带雨林国家公园来。谢谢大家。
Thank you. That was beautiful, beautiful pictures. Thank you so much. And a lot of great information. We all want to go now. I want to introduce our next speaker from Tianjin, from Nankai University. Liu Shu Chang, environmental geochemist at Nankai University. And I have heard there's a beautiful park there in Tianjin. So I'm anxious to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to open my voice. It's clear. Is it clear?
No video.
Huh?
Professor, no video. Turn on your video.
Oh, video. Okay. Okay. I'm glad to have a talk in this meeting. I'm Xueqiang Lu from Nankai University. My talk is related to an invasive plant, very famous invasive plant called smooth coat grass, Spartina alterniflora. Actually, the topic of my talk is climatic effect from restoration or oyster reef in the Spartina alterniflora invaded tidal flight from the perspective of methane and nitrous oxide production. As we all know, the global warming potentials of methane and nitrous oxide are 28 and 236 times of carbon dioxide. And these three photos are taken in the west coast of Bohai Bay. It's close to Tianjin. We observed that the oyster reef seems to replace Spartina alterniflora recently. The grass is dying and the oyster reef is forming. Our study focuses on the influence of this process on the emission of the two greenhouse gases. Spartina alterniflora is intentionally introduced to China from US in 1979 by Professor Chun, who was born in Tianjin. He brought the grass from the eastern coast of US, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. The Georgia one grew better than the others. His experiment was initially conducted in the coast of Fujian province. And since then, the grass has spread very fast and everywhere along the coast of China. And the grass was Spartina alterniflora was listed in the China's invasive land species list released in the 2003. This is the first list of the species. There are many methods to control grass growth. The method can be classified into three types. One is physical method, like mowing, blowing, etc. The other is a chemical method, like using some chemicals, herbicides. And the last one is a biological method, like species substitution. As I mentioned in the first slides, we observed the forming of oyster reef. And the oyster reef existed in this area before, a long time before, actually. We are wondering that this process can may be another type of species substitution based on ecological succession. Actually it's a real nature-based solution, I think. But what's the effect? Oyster reef have several positive ecological functions, like water purification, refuel habitat, something like that. However, it is also facing a disturbance from human activities and natural forces. The reef condition in Bohai Bay is poor. Actually, no, only in the north of the bay, only here, the reef can be found in the subtidal zone, not the intertidal zone. We studied here. This is the first time to observe the occurrence in the tidal flight. The oyster type is Grass-tier gigas. These two photos can provide an image of this mixture of grass and oyster, and this the formation of oyster reef. So again, here's the objective of this study. Coastal ecosystem is an important part of a so-called blue carbon. We found the coastal ecosystem is changing from Spartina altiniflora to the oyster reef. And what's the effect on greenhouse gases production? This is the key objective of our study. We separated the area. Do this sampling here. We separate the area into four types: bar mud flat, grass invited area, oyster reef, and the mixed community area. For each type, we collected 3 50-centimeter core using a piston core. The core was sliced with a 10-centimeter section. We measured the geochemical parameters like as shown here. Here's the vertical profiles. The trends are complex. In general, the area with grass are similar. The bare mud flat is similar to the oyster reef area. These two figures show the sediment microbial community composition at the phylum level and its relationship with environmental factors. The species is mainly related to DOC, DC, methane, pH, and salinity. The methane metabolism is related to CN ratio and DSE. However, there's no clear correlation between nitrogen metabolism with environmental factors because nitrogen cycling is more complicated. These figures show the potential production of methane and nitrous oxide. It can be seen that the methane production for the area with grass, including grass invited area and the grass oyster mixed area, are higher than the bare flat. But the nitrogenous production in the oyster reef is the highest. Please attention here. The production is potential production. We didn't measure the real gas emission from the on-site. We collected the sediment and cultured in the lab and to see the potential production. The left figure here shows the profiles or percentage of the misogynes genes. We want to know the mechanism of the result. The grass invaded area changed the mesonogenic composition compared to the bare mudflat. The change is different from the oyster reef. Oyster reef formation can also change the mesogenic composition clearly at the surface sediment. The red figure shows that the variability of the mesogenic community composition was the greatest, and the bare mudflat is the smallest. The mixture area is the highest, and the bare mudflat is the smallest, the variability. We also analyze the metagenome to observe the mesogenesis, including 4 modules and 24 major function genes in mesogenesis were annotated. It is clear that Spartina altiniflora invasion and oyster reef formation gradually altered the modules and the genes abundance of the mesogenesis. We also analyze the mesogene of the annotated pathway and 46 major functional genes involved in the nitrogen cycle. The results here shows that the grass invasion and the oyster reef formation affected the process of nitrogen cycle and the abundance of the function genes. Denitrification is the main pathway of nitrous oxide production. To sum up, from our study, we can conclude that if oyster reef replace Spartina altiniflora invited type flight, the methane emissions from sediments will not change significantly, but nitrous emissions would possibly increase. Because the effect of ecological success is absolutely complex. Further study is necessary. This is not the final conclusion, I think. For the potential cooperation, myself is the leader of the Tianjin Laboratory of Environmental Technology for Complex Transmedia Pollution and the Tianjin International Joint Research Center for Environmental Biogeochemical Technology. I would like to be involved in the Sino-American academic and technological collaboration. Thank you very much. That's all for my presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Liu. That was great. Very technical, but easy to follow. Thank you. I want to just remind people, I didn't do this earlier, but we have a translation button at the bottom right of your screen, and you can turn it on and it will translate to the language that you want to listen to. And then if it is speaking the language you want, that you normally can understand, then turn the translation button off. Usually that's better for listening. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Director Kai Wu Hua of Division of Natural Reserve Management in Fujian Provincial Forestry Bureau. Thank you so much. I look forward to your presentation.
尊敬的夏洛特·克里斯坦森副主席，各位领导、各位专家、各位同行，大家上午好。很荣幸今天有机会参加这个论坛。前面听了几位学者和专家的发言，深受启发，很有收获。根据会议的安排，下面我代表福建省自然保护地主管部门发言。我发言的题目是大力加强自然保护，积极应对气候变化。我今天主要讲3个方面的内容。第一个是介绍一下福建自然保护地的概况，第二个是讲一下加强自然保护应对气候变化我们做的一些工作，第三个想讲一下我们下一步工作一些思路。第一个方面的情况就是福建是中国南方重点的集体林，山多林多，是中国东南沿海地区重要的生态屏障。我们全省的森林覆盖率、植被生态质量、生态文明指数均居全国第一，野生动植物物种的数量居全国的前列，是生物多样性非常丰富的一个省份。目前我们全省已经建立了各类的自然保护地358处，其中国家公园1处，自然保护区111处，自然公园246处。自然公园在我们省里面又分成5类，其中风景名胜区是53处，地质公园是24处，森林公园是154处，海洋公园是7处，湿地公园是8处。右边这张图就是我们358个自然保护地在我们福建的一个总体的分布的一个情况。上述的这些保护地有效的保护了我们全省85%以上的珍稀濒危物种，70%以上的典型生态系统，70%以上的主要江河源头森林植被。应该说我们保护地在我们福建生态建设、生物多样性保护方面起到的非常重要的作用。目前经过多年的努力，福建省以国家公园为主体的自然保护地体系架构已经初步建成，为维护福建生态安全和实现经济社会可持续发展筑牢了安全的基石。第二个方面，我介绍一下我们自然保护地管理部门加强自然保护应对气候变化方面做的一些工作。气候变化是当今人类生存和发展面临的严峻挑战，是国际社会普遍关注的重大全球性问题。发挥林业碳汇功能是全球公认的最经济、最环保的固碳减排措施，是应对气候变化的重要举措之一。福建气候条件良好，发挥林业碳汇的优势和潜力十分巨大。据测算，目前福建省森林蓄积量、碳储量、年增固碳量等指标均高于全国的平均水平。碳储量已经超过4亿吨。我们福建林业非常高度的重视应对气候变化的工作，充分发挥森林碳汇的功能，助力双碳目标的如期实现。我们这边有一个数据就是自2016年开展林业碳汇交易试点以来，我们全省已经累计完成备案申请的林业碳汇项目124万亩，碳汇量347万吨，已成交321万吨，成交金额4665万元。成交量和成交额在全国都居于首位。林业的碳汇主要来自森林、草原、湿地、木质林产品4个方面。 那我们这个福建自然保护地这个碳汇呢，主要是来自森林和湿地两个方面。近年来，这个福建各级自然保护地管理部门这个非常重视这个自然保护，通过这个减排、保碳、增汇、封存4个技术途径，努力增强碳汇功能，减少碳排放，积极应对气候变化，取得了较好的成效。我们主要采取的这么一些措施对啊，一个是加强这个森林资源的保护，我们实施了这个武夷山脉、大云山脉森林生态系统的保护和修复工程，来推进了这个重点流域山水林田湖、湖草沙一体化保护和修复，还健全了生态保护和修复自身的体系，加强这个生态安全屏障的体系建设，还有实施了这个森林碳汇的重点工程，全面加强森林经营，调整优化林份的结构。另外一个方面就是加强这个天然林生态公园这个保护修复，以及沿海防护林体系的建设，科学推进低效林份的抚育改造，增加森林面积和蓄积量，增强林业的碳汇功能，组织开展森林资源保护常态化的监管，采取高分辨率遥感的影像、现地核查等方式，全面掌握森林资源变化的情况，及时发现问题，依法依规查处破坏森林资源的违法违规的行为。第二个方面是加强这个湿地的保护恢复。湿地是重要的储碳库，特别是这个红树林是这个高碳储能力的湿地。目前我们全省列入国际重要湿地1处，国家重要湿地1处，省重要湿地50处，省级以上湿地类型自然保护区10处，湿地公园10处，水产种子资源保护区11处，海洋保护区14处。我们省呢，到目前为止已经初步建成了这个以湿地保护区、湿地公园和重要湿地为主体的湿地保护体系。这个湿地生态保护修复这几年也取得明显的成效，特别是这个“十三五”以来全省累计投入超过9亿元，用于湿地保护与修复的项目，实施退养还施750多公顷，修复湿地生态系统800多公顷，组织开展红树林保护修复专项行动。2021年以来，全省营造红树林929公顷，开展现有红树林修复509公顷。这个2022年的9月，这个福建省政府印发了《福建省护花迷草除治攻坚行动方案》，这个提出1年明显见效，2年基本除治，3年完成修复和长期加强管理的总体目标。这个省财政厅投入2亿多元补助资金，用于全省护花迷草除治及生态修复。这个右边这张图这个就是我们这个护花迷草除治的一个照片。在福建这边，我们主要是采取物理除治的方式对这个护花迷草进行除治。那除治完的这个滩涂呢，一部分这个是恢复种上红树林，一部分进行这个鸟类栖息地的改造，还有一部分呢是保留成光滩保留成光滩。这边就是我们右边这个2组的图片就是我们福建开展这个护花迷草治理前后这个对比的照片这几年通过大力开展这个湿地生态的修复、鸟类生境的改造和退养还施，这个湿地的主体功能显著提升，碳汇的功能显著的加强。这个湿地的这个生态生物多样性也得到了明显的改善。我们这几年通过观测发现了这个白鹳、斑头雁等物种新纪录，黑脸琵鹭、中华凤头燕鸥等珍稀濒危的鸟类的 分布地不断扩大。我们全省这个湿地水鸟的总数达到220多种。第3个方面，我们是加强自然保护地体系的建设。我们福建高度重视自然保护地的建设。2019年11月，这个福建省委省政府率先在全国制定印发关于建立自然保护地体系的实施方案，提出按照应保尽保的原则，秉承保护自然、服务人民永续发展的目标，着力构建以武夷山国家公园为主体、自然保护区为基础、各类自然公园为补充的自然保护地体系，为建设机制活、产业优、百姓富、生态美的新福建奠定生态根基。右边这张图啊，就是我们福建这个保护地体系的一个架构啊。我们目前就是一组啊，一组是指这个武夷山国家公园3个带，3个带就是武夷山脉跟这个字比较小跟博平岭啊，跟这边一个带，中间这条带是鸠峰山、戴云山啊，这个一条带，还有沿海的这个一个沿海的保护带，还有9个群组啊，9个保护地的群组，这个是我们福建整个的架构。这个我们也规划了在“十四五”期间，我们自然保护地体系建设这个方面的6大任务啊，这个一个就是完善治理体系，第2个要提升管理能力，第3个要夯实资源的保护，第4个要推进民生共享，第5个是要加强自然教育，第6个是加强闽台的交流。我们也提出了到2025年要新规划11处自然保护区，力争新建或者晋升11处自然公园，至2035年探索和培育新增1到2处的国家公园候选区。第4个方面，我们是加强这个野生动植物的保护。我们福建啊，建立了多部门联合打击破坏野生动植物资源的违法犯罪，打击野生动植物非法贸易专项行动。这个通过这些保护的措施，我们全省的野生动植物资源的调查、栖息地的保护、防御救护这个等工作都取得新的一些进展。第5个方面，我们是非常重视这个森林火灾的防控。我们主要是通过采取加强这个趋势的会商研判、监测预报、监督检查、基础设施建设等防控工作，确保全省的森林火灾防控的形势平稳。从目前我们这几年的情况看，虽然遭遇了很多极端的天气，但是我们福建呢，这个总体的这个森林防火的这个形势还是非常好的。这个右边的这个图片就是一个我们在野外布设的一些这个森林防火的一些探头，右边这个还有这个我们还开发了这个我们森林防火的一些管理的器械平台，我们也是利用这个遥感影像啊、无人机啊，还包括我们野外布设的一些探头啊，这样子综合的一些措施，来加强我们这个森林防火的能力。第6个方面，我们是着力加强林业有害生物的防控。这个我们对这个林业有害生物啊，这个是防控是非常重视啊，从事关生态安全的高度重视这项工作，统筹做好外来入侵物种的普查啊。刚刚这个上面这个一个是这个松林的松采线虫啊，第2个就是这个护花迷草，还有这个水茯苓，这个是我们比较有代表性的一个入侵的物种啊。我们统筹做好这个普查疫情的检疫的执法专项行动，特别是我们层层的压实责任，这个制定出这个目标呢，我们围绕着这个目标精准防控，而且突出质量的管理啊。通过这些措施，这个我们持续加强森林、这个湿地等生态系统的保护，这个有效的减少因人为和自然干扰导致的碳排放，为碳达峰、碳中和目标和应对气候变化做出我们的贡献。此外啊，我们还非常重视加强这个娱乐的宣传，营造这个良好的氛围。 我们每年都利用这个植树节，是国际森林日、世界湿地日、生物多样性日、世界野生动植物日、文化和自然遗产日、爱鸟周、野生动物保护宣传月等重要节点，组织宣传这个习近平生态文明的思想、林业的相关法律法规和林业建设在维护生态安全、保护生物多样性、推进全球应对气候变化中发挥的重要作用。日常重视在主流媒体、福建省林业局官网、微信公众号等及时发布林业生态建设、应对气候变化的相关信息，解读政策、普及知识、展示行动。下一步我们是下一步我先谈一下下一步我们的一些思路。这个福建省委省政府高度重视碳达峰、碳中和工作。今年8月印发了关于完整、准确、全面贯彻新发展理念，做好碳达峰、碳中和工作的实施意见，为我省做好碳达峰、碳中和工作科学制定了时间表、路线图。我们省林业局目前也正着手制定福建省林业碳汇专项发展规划。我省各级自然保护地管理部门将按照省林业局的统一部署，加强森林湿地固碳增汇研究，借鉴包括美国在内的国外的先进经验，立足省情、林情和自然保护地的实际，切实发挥好自然保护地的功能作用，积极开展自然保护地碳汇管理创新，进一步拓展和提升自然保护地的减排固碳增汇功能，为实现碳中和目标、积极应对气候变化做出我们新的贡献。以上就是我今天要跟各位分享的内容。感谢大家。
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you. We are next going to see a presentation that was pre-recorded in Slovenia by the director of Triglav National Park. Triglav National Park is also a sister national park to Crater Lake National Park, and that is how they got involved with us. Craig Ackerman, the superintendent of Crater Lake National Park, had said he wanted all of us to come together from all these continents. So we unfortunately won't hear their director in person, but of course we're all on virtual anyway. He made a pre-recording, Dr. Tit Potoknik, who is the director of Triglav National Park in Slovenia. So Shanbo's going to play that for us.
Good morning to China. Good afternoon to the United States. Hello to everybody from Slovenia, from Triglav National Park. Here in Slovenia, it should be around 3 a.m. in the morning, and I have this presentation of Triglav National Park and what we are doing related to climate change and sustainability in our park. So let me have this presentation in the second Climate Change and Sustainability and Oregon and China Forum. And let me speak about Slovenia, and let me speak about Triglav National Park and what we are doing in this field. So the Triglav National Park, you see the highest peak of the Triglav National Park, that is Mount Triglav, on the PowerPoint presentation. So the climate change impacts in Triglav National Park. Let me say that climate change is now worldwide And unfortunately, we have this climate change impact also in the Triglav National Park. But first, let me say some words about Triglav National Park. Triglav National Park, you can see, is in the European continent. So it's, we can say, in the middle of the European continent. We have Austria to the north, we have Italy to the west, Hungary to the east, and Croatia to the south. That is the map on the right side. If you look at the map in the middle, you see the mountain range. It is called the Alps. So Slovenia and Triglav National Park is located on the east side, or I can say southeast side of the Alps. And you can see then on the left side that Triglav National Park on the map of Slovenia is located on the northwest, and below the map of Slovenia you have the map of Triglav National Park. To tell some figures about Triglav National Park, so we can see that we have 3 conservation areas. The surface of core area, it's about 76% of the whole area, is something more than 63,000 square hectares, and the buffer zone is 24%, that is 20,000 hectares. So everything together sums up to 83,000 hectares. The thing is that when we talk about the Triglav National Park, it covers almost the entire Slovenian part of the Julian Alps. So Triglav National Park is a typical alpine park with Slovenia's highest mountains. And like I said, it's the only national park. It will stay the only national park because of the parameters. No other area in Slovenia has the parameters to become a national park, and it is also the largest protected area in Slovenia. So it's around 4% of the whole Slovenia. It has wilderness and cultural landscape, 37 settlements, 2,444 inhabitants, so it is not a lot. Triglav National Park has its own act. The latest one is from the year 2010, but I can say that the area was already protected in 1924. So it means not the whole area, 84,000 hectares, but 2,000 hectares. 2,000 hectares were protected already then. So it means in 2024, we will have 100 years of park of first date. An area in the park was protected. We have our own management plan, and we have the Triglav National Park Management Authority, and we are also quite national and international important. National important because of the reasons I have said before. We are the only national park. We have the highest mountain in Slovenia, and also the international importance. So we established our park organization. That is organization established from the oldest national parks in Europe. We are members of Europark organization, and related to Europark organization, we are one of the oldest members of Europark organization. Within the Europark organization, we have also a sister park, which is our transboundary park with Italians, that is Parco Naturale Prealpi Giulia. And I can say that we have definitely a success in the Europark organization, as we have gotten the first ones from the transboundary parks, the European Charter for Sustainable Tourism in Protected Areas. But nevertheless, we are also involved in UNESCO MAP, so UNESCO Man and Biosphere program. We are a biosphere reserve, and the whole biosphere reserve Julian Alps has almost 200,000 hectares. Together, which is a plan in 2024 with the Italians, we will have a biosphere reserve Julian Alps with almost 3,000 hectares. So we are doing quite a lot also with the sister parks, and nevertheless, we have one very beautiful sister park that is Crater Lake National Park. So what are the climate change impacts in Triglav National Park? I won't be long because I'm limited with time, but to say something. So there's a threat to biodiversity. We have now more frequent natural disasters. So the agriculture, forestry, and tourism as most affected sectors. The problem is also spread of invasive alien species and other harmful organisms. Extreme changes in precipitation and temperature patterns. Then the problem is also the glaciers retreat and permafrost disappearance. And one of the biggest problems which we have seen also this year is the reduction of water availability. So there's definitely, because of all the climate change impacts, significant pressure on environmental, economic, and social challenges. What are the climate change impacts on biodiversity? So it is a fact that species migration due to loss of habitat. Then gradual disappearance of alpine flora and fauna as called glacier relics. Upper tree line is rising, and ecosystem structural and functional changes. So that's why we have identified bioindicators to climate change affects most substantive species and ecosystems. What considers forests related to climate change impacts? The forest ecosystems are extremely sensitive to climate change. The increasing frequency of natural disturbances, significant transformation in tree species composition, and also low vitality of trees, spread of bark beetles. And the fact is that that's our the biggest issue is that projected effects of climate change are 3 times greater in the Alps than in the rest of the world. So things are going forward really fast. And one example is the Triglav National Park glacier. So we can see on the picture on the right-hand side the rapid decline in size of the Triglav Glacier due to climate change, what was 100 years ago and what was 3 years ago. So it is seen also on the picture on the left-hand side that from what we had in 1850, we have almost none left. Everything related to climate change. So definitely climate adaptive management is needed. So what we are doing in this field, the thing is definitely visitor use management is needed. Related to that, especially the use of the sustainable transport, that is bus, trains, also the electrical ones. We are limiting the individual motor vehicles in the valleys and so on. We are also having a project of renewable energy, so we should be self-efficient with a combination with solar panels and batteries. Related to all of that, we are measuring the carbon footprint. We want to be carbon neutral. And the thing that also is important, that we are building strategies for the whole area of the biosphere region, Julian Alps, and among the people, not only the visitors, but also among the inhabitants, is that we forward them information about the climate change. We raise the awareness of people how to act in nature, how to handle everything, to impact to people for changing the behavior, the relationship to nature. And the main thing is that we raise the responsibility, from our responsibility and also the responsibility of everybody else. So the visitors and the inhabitants, how the nature should be kept and how all of us should adapt to climate change. This short presentation is just the introduction of the active role that we must have in the nature preservation, and hopefully also with the cooperation not only with National Park Crater Lake, but also with the national parks in China. We have a lot of things, I do believe, in common, a lot of interest to cooperate, and definitely a lot of content where we can be more successful if we cooperate. So I thank you all for your attention. If you have any questions, or if you want to contact me, contact us. We have, I can say at the beginning, 60 good employees. We have a good expert service. So these are the contact information, and you are welcome to call or to write. So thank you all, and I wish you a very nice and very good future forum. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Shembo, for playing that. One day we'll have them live with us, but like he said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning over there. Okay, our next presenter is Dr. Ashley De Antonio, Associate Professor of Nature-Based Recreation Management in the Department of Forest Ecosystems and Society of Oregon State University. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited this evening, or this morning for some of you, to share some of my work in national parks here in the United States, where we're able to integrate aspatial and spatial data from visitor use to help inform the sustainable management of national parks. I'm going to start with a diagram that sort of illustrates the way I approach my visitor use research. And then I'm going to walk us through a case study from a national park outside Oregon to show how this type of data can help inform sustainable park management and visitor use management. The majority of my research really focuses on this purple block here, visitor spatial behavior. So where visitors are going when they're visiting national parks, how much time they're spending at different destinations. And this is a spatial type of data. It has X and Y coordinates. We can place people on a map and we can understand where they go. And oftentimes this data can be collected from GPS units or from mobile device data from cell phones. but I'm also interested in understanding what influences where people go in national parks, why they make the decisions they make. And so we compare the spatial data with aspatial data using visitor surveys that allow us to understand visitors' experiences, their motivations, and norms they may have. Another aspect of my work, which I'll talk about today, focuses on understanding the social and the ecological conditions that visitor behavior in our national parks might contribute to. So I'm going to illustrate this research with a case study from Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. And I've used similar research approaches in various national parks in the US. And I think these approaches are applicable to national parks anywhere in the world. And I do want to acknowledge that this project was with collaborators from Penn State University and Utah State University. And this work has been published in the Journal of Parks and Recreation Administration if you're interested in looking at the study as a whole. I'm only going to highlight 2 pieces today. So this was not a park-wide study. This occurred at a particular lake system in Grand Teton National Park called String and Lee Lakes. You can see them here on this map. There are some trails along the lake system, but the lake is very popular for water-based recreation, kayaking, canoeing, wading in the water. And this can be especially important in the face of climate change, as these water-based recreational activities may become more popular in some of our national parks as temperatures heat up in the summer and folks seek locations where they can participate in water-based recreation to cool off. Grand Teton National Park managers were very concerned about a rapid increase in use of this lake system as people sought out places where they could cool off and hang out on this lake. They were seeing impacts to vegetation and soil from recreation use. They were seeing new user groups and potential for conflict. And so here in this box, I have the question that managers asked of us as researchers. We came in to understand how visitors were using the area, what experiences they were having, and the impacts that they were causing to vegetation and soil at these lakes. So this is our study approach. Again, my work very much pairs survey approaches with spatial GPS approaches. So the visitors took a survey when they got to the lake. Then they carried a GPS unit with them during their trip, so I could see where they went. And then when visitors left the lake system, they completed another survey where they could tell us about their experiences. So I'm going to highlight just 2 results from this study to show the power of combining the social and ecological data and the spatial data to understand visitor use in this park. We found that the most visitors, 95%, were coming to String and Lee Lake to find a sense of escape, meaning they wanted to relax, they wanted to be away from crowds, and they wanted to disconnect from the busyness of daily life. But almost a quarter of those visitors, 22%, said they could not find the escape that they sought when they came to String and Lee Lake. So they came wanting the sense of relaxation, and they left not having achieved that relaxation. So we were able to look at where visitors went, and we found that visitors who did find escape traveled further and hiked deeper into the trail system than those who did not. And the only way we're able to do this is by pairing the survey data to the GPS tracks so we could see where people went based on their survey responses. Another piece of data that we looked at was how resource conditions impacted visitors. Resource conditions like vegetation loss and soil erosion, and the creation of visitor-created trails. I can go through this a little quickly, but it's in that paper if you're interested in looking in more detail. We mapped all of the resource impacts that visitor created to soil and vegetation. The darker the red, the more impact there is. And we found a lot of impacts here, almost 3 kilometers of visitor-created trails and 4,700 meters squared of visitor-created sites. When we overlaid where visitors went and how much they interacted with the vegetation and soil impact, we're able to look at the relationships between these impacts and the visitor experience. I won't go into this whole table here, but this table is from our paper. I'll focus on these takeaways. Overall, we found that visitors were exposed to a lot of resource impacts. Most people interacted with soil and vegetation impacts, but most visitors said it had no effect on their experience. And the time visitors interacted with these resource impacts, with these soil and vegetation impacts, did not over-influence their perceptions. So visitors did not really perceive or were impacted by the ecological damage that recreation was causing. So I'll just wrap up and end by talking about some of the management implications we took back to Grand Teton National Park. Visitor education and expectations for the crowding conditions they may experience were important for the visitor experience. The impacts from recreation to soil and veg were high in intensity, meaning we had a lot of it, but it was relatively small in space. It didn't spread out throughout the trail system. And that eastern shoreline of the lake was incredibly important for these impacts and the visitor experience. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Again, I think these are approaches that can be used in a variety of national parks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. The next presentation is by one of Ashley's colleagues, Dr. Ian Mananura, Assistant Professor in the College of Forestry at Oregon State University. Welcome, Ian.
Yeah, your mic is not on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Good.
thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this framework. My work is my research is on ecotourism as a mechanism to advance the sustainability of socio-ecological systems, particularly in how to use ecotourism or nature-based tourism to advance, to improve community livelihoods, while at the same time reducing, human-wildlife conflict. And my research is particularly focused, if I can get this to move, focused in Africa, in East Africa to be specific, on mountain gorillas, particularly the habitat that is shared by Uganda, Rwanda, and Democratic Republic of Congo. So the key, mountain gorillas are very, a highly endangered and threatened species and critical for conservation. So those three countries are mandated and have a mission to protect, preserve that habitat and of course mountain gorillas. But the key challenge to conservation of mountain gorillas is human livelihoods in this area that actually are the key, drivers of human wildlife conflicts in that area. Some of these livelihood activities include encroachment, but also harvest or extraction of forest resources. Most of these community populations that are around the mountain gorilla habitat depend on agricultural production. So they use forest resources to supplement their livelihoods. With that background, though, mountain gorillas is a very popular tourism activity, and it generates a lot of revenue. In fact, one of the countries, Rwanda, it is the primary economic driver, economic sector for the country, or foreign exchange earner for the country. And that presents an opportunity to be able to improve livelihoods of the people who live in that area, at the same time contribute towards addressing conflict between human and populations and gorillas, or even wildlife in general. Such opportunities for those communities are for example, creation of small-scale social enterprises that then, would provide communities with alternative livelihoods, then, that would, allow communities to generate resources, have alternative livelihoods, and so they can reduce pressure on forests or dependence on forests for their livelihoods. So my work really, it encompasses a number of questions. The first question really that I'm interested in is to figure out to what extent are these human interactions, these adverse human interactions, actually affecting the human livelihoods. And when those livelihoods are adversely affected, to what extent is that a problem for wildlife? And then finally, I wish to understand whether tourism can actually help us to address those constraints, those not only human livelihoods constraints, but also the threat that poses to wildlife. So I will go through briefly, each of these by illustrating the conceptual approach of my work, but also the key outcomes that we have realized from research. So, typically when, the socio-ecological systems are out of balance, when their social and ecological risks are not mitigated and not controlled. And here, one of the illustrators of that imbalance is the conflict, that occurs, which is a representative of ecological changes that either are a result of climate change effects or even indirectly as a result of social risk. And of course, suddenly the human wildlife conflict, such as crop raiding or crop loss, animal attack, that has a direct implication on social systems, which indirectly then affects ecological systems and then creates a cycle of instability, of imbalance in the social system. So this is from a socio-ecological systems approach. This is how I frame my research questions, and I will illustrate briefly. But the impact on the social system, I use the sustainable livelihoods approach to understand how conflict actually impacts people. So for the first question, in terms of how what conflict between humans and wildlife impacts livelihoods, I'm interested to understand how human livelihoods are adversely affected by conflict. For example, when animals destroy crop fields, how does that affect people? When animals, when there's increased interaction between people and wildlife, how does that impact the people who live very close to these areas? But also, to understand that social risk, the impact of conflict on people may not be uniform. There are people who are much more affected than the others. For example, people who are much more vulnerable. For example, people who have poor health. But also, we understand that there are people who are much more adaptable, who are much more able to adapt to the changes and the threats from wildlife conflict. For example, people who have a stronger social network, people who have human capital, that then they can rely on those resources to recover from that effect. So from the sustainable livelihoods approach, the threat of wildlife to human livelihoods, can be controlled, once we understand those vulnerabilities and adaptive capabilities. So these are some of the examples that I explore within this broader research question. One of the illustrations of some of the research outcomes illustrate these issues I've just mentioned. For example, one of the studies that I indicate here on the slide shows that indeed crop raiding creates food insecurity in these park neighboring communities, which then creates a cycle of extractive forest extractive behavior among the communities that are actually that end up being dependent on forest systems to sustain their livelihoods. This is just an illustration of sort of a research outcome that comes from this question that I presented. The second question really looks at, okay, to what extent then, if human livelihoods are constrained, how does that then impact wildlife? And here I look at, for example, how food security issues. I look at changing in financial security, changes in social security. To what extent are those impacting it adversely the wildlife? And when that occurs, to what extent then is that responsible for increased animal attack, increased conflict? Some of the examples of this work, have some of the outcomes of this work, as you can be accessed online with these publications. But the key outcomes of this work, is that there are food insecurity issues that are associated with illegal use of forest resources, lack of poor capital, financial capital, or poor access to financial resources, and even poor health as well. These are some of the key drivers of extractive use of forest resources that then end up being an indirect driver of human-wildlife conflict. So the point here we are trying to make with these publications is that efforts to address conflict between mountain gorillas and people around the great ape habitat in the East African region, efforts must be addressed towards addressing food security, access to financial resources, but also improving human health aspects as well. So finally, the question that ties the prior questions is to what extent is tourism or community-based tourism helping to address social risks, but also the ecological risks that are linked to the conflict between human and wildlife in places that we work. So we explore here to what extent does ecotourism help to empower communities who live very close to this natural landscape. But also, second, to what if those communities are empowered by tourism, is that helping to reduce threats to wildlife, human threat to wildlife? Because if it's not addressing it, if it's not reducing pressure from people on wildlife, then tourism may not be actually contributing to addressing the conservation problem. Is tourism creating enough incentives to be able to change behavior? For example, positive behavior that is towards the wildlife, but also towards the park. For example, are people much more tolerant to wildlife on their land from the park? To what extent, is tourism helping to, dissuade people from retaliatory killings? For example, if an animal comes out to your farm and kills your livestock or destroys your crop field, to what extent is tourism, able to convince you to not retaliate by killing wildlife on your land? But also, I explore questions to figure out to what extent does ecotourism contribute directly to towards protected area management. For example, does tourism enable communities to participate in wildlife governance? Does tourism help by creating revenue enough to be able to be invested in law enforcement activities? An example here that illustrates some of the research outcomes is that much of my research has shown that yes, to some extent, tourism creates some tangible benefits such as jobs and income, but within the context of these communities and the community needs, that income is that tangible impact is insignificant. Because mostly those the benefits, the tourism benefits to the communities that I see in Africa are social in nature, they're intangible. For example, using tourism money to build schools, using tourism money to build social enterprises such as health centers. While those are appreciated, the link to biodiversity conservation is very poor. So and that is one of the challenges of tying tourism or ecotourism to resource conservation or protection. And finally, one of the recent paper that came out from this research shows that small-scale ecotourism-based operations are much more likely to create benefits for communities compared to these large-scale programs that involve private sector, and community partnerships, and even public sector as well, because small-scale programs seems to be to have the ability to actually transfer resources to the people on the ground, compared to larger private sector-led programs, because there are structural limitations that limit access to limit the access of communities to the tourism benefit and opportunities. So to sum it up, tourism and ecotourism has been really advanced in our field of conservation as a mechanism in which we can actually create sustainability within the social and ecological system. The findings from my research seems to suggest that the benefits of ecotourism seems to be much more towards improving the social system, the social well-being, and the link to biodiversity conservation, the positive link to biodiversity conservation is rarely evident within in practical work. I hope this relates to some of the work that you're doing with ecotourism and nature-based tourism in Hainan and Fujian national parks, and I look forward to participating and collaborating with you on research on ecotourism as a mechanism for community development and conservation of wildlife. Thank you.
Can you hear me? There we go. Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, I lost my screen. I was lost from all of you. We have two more speakers, and our next speaker is Li Jing, the lecturer for the Fujian Agriculture and Forestry University in Fujian province. Welcome, Li Jing.
好，大家可以听到吗？好，尊敬的各位领导、专家们，大家好，我是来自福建农林大学资源与环境学院的老师李晶。很荣幸有机会能够受邀参加本次的交流研讨会。简单做个自我介绍，我博士毕业于中国科学院大气物理研究所。那我读博期间呢，主要是研究各种大尺度的气候模态，比如厄尔尼诺南方涛动，或者是北大西洋涛动对于北半球中高纬度植被生长的一个影响。那么毕业之后呢，我顺利进入了香港中文大学能源环境及可持续发展研究所做博士后。那我博士后期间做的研究主要是研究这个北半球植被跟热浪的一个关系，还有陆气相互作用及其机理。今天我为大家带来的报告也结合了我之前的一些相关研究成果，只是从大的一个空间尺度转变成了一个小区域尺度，并且聚焦于我们的国家公园的植被情况。所以我今天给大家带来的报告的题目就是武夷山国家公园植被覆盖对极端高温事件的响应及其反馈。我主要从这3个方面为大家进行介绍：研究背景、现状及其计划。首先为大家介绍一下研究背景。在即将结束的2022年，可以说是我们人类有史以来经历的最酷热的一年。那据美国国家海洋和大气国家环境信息中心9月的报告显示，2022年呢的夏季是欧洲和中国有史以来最热 北美和亚洲第2热，整个地球第5热的一个夏天。那 NOAA 发布的一个关于气候异常事件的8月份月报也记载了一个今年夏天世界各地可以看到都遭受了一个热浪的侵袭，同时还可以看到比如2级海冰的一个异常的减少，还有巴西亚马逊这个森林的一个野火，以及巴基斯坦的暴雨和洪灾等等，都让整个世界的人民都经历了一个水深火热的日子。不仅如此，据 IPCC 的2021年第6次评估报告指出呢，这样的极端热事件在未来也会愈发的严重。左图可以看到是10年一遇的一个极端热事件，在未来不同气候情景下的频率以及强度可能发生的一个变化。在本世纪末呢，目前我们在已经比工业革命前升温1度的情形下，10年一遇的这个极端热事件，平均每10年已经大约多发了2.8次，那强度呢已经增强了1.2摄氏度。而在未来的不同的升温情景下，10年一遇的极端热事件，平均每10年会大约多发4到9次，那强度会增强2到5摄氏度。对于更加极端的，像右图的50年一遇的极端热事件而言，频次和强度也会发生显著的增加。那极端热事件显然也会对植被带来不同水平、不同程度的影响，甚至破坏。如图所示，图为从分子水平到整棵树木的水平，极端高温所带来的影响。从图的最右侧可以看到很明显的，受到高温影响下，各个细胞过程会受到影响。那中间图呢是叶片在一些生理过程会受到影响，比如说呼吸作用、蒸腾作用以及挥发性有机物的一个产生。那最左边是在整个植物水平上，热浪会显著降低树木的生长，并改变生物质的分配，甚至可能影响树木的死亡。目前呢，关于极端高温对于植被生长的影响和研究已经引起了科学家们的广泛关注。这个是德国学者带来的一个研究，他们是利用了遥感卫星数据，对欧洲地区的一个极端温度事件和植被生长进行了一系列的研究。那左图展示的是整个植被生长季在不同时段内，比如说3月、3、4月份、5、6月份到后面的8、9月份，极端温度事件和归一化植被指数，就是用来表征植被生长状况的一个指数的一个关系。那左图的左列代表的是极端高温对于植被生长的影响，可以看到在植被刚刚生长的一个3、4月份，极端高温对于植被生长起到的是一个正贡献，所以都是绿色的。那随着生长季的一个发展，除了高纬度以外，极端高温对于植被生长都产生了负面的影响。与之相反，这个左图的右列显示的是极端低温对于植被生长的影响。但总体而言，可以看到极端高温对于植被的负贡献影响范围是更广的，而且程度更强。因为可以看到大家这个红色的区域可能范围更大，而且它的这个点颜色也会越深。但右图展示的上面是不同地形，下面是不同的植被类型跟极端温度的一个关系。我们可以看出，农田、草地还有混交林是最常受到影响的土地覆盖类型之一，而高程对于相应的极端天气影响的空间分布影响相对而言会较小。这个工作是我去年发表于 Agriculture and Forest Meteorology 一个期刊上面的一篇文章，从半球尺度上也对一个热浪和植被的关系进行了探究。我们可以看到，上图是北半球的一个叶面积指数，就是叶片的叶面积指数和夏季的热浪天数，左边是热浪天数，右边是热浪振幅的一个相关关系。那下图呢，下面这一幅图是植被类型的分布图。我们可以看到，在空间的一个模态上面，二者存在一个很明显的匹配。那也就是说，我们的热浪跟我们的植被类型实际上有一个很强的一个关系。比如在浅蓝色部分，北方常绿森林，它跟这个热浪的关系呈现的是一个红色，那就是说它是一个正相关的关系。那么在南方的草原或者是温带阔叶林、温带针叶林等区域，它跟热浪呈现的是一个负相关关系，所以在图上呈现的是一个蓝色的点。并且这个二者的关系以北美地区可以看到它的这个二者关系会更为显著。因此我们项目这个研究呢，对于北美地区 接下来是对着北美地区，因为他们二者关系更为显著嘛，所以我对这个北美地区进行了进一步的研究，就是研究不同的植被类型区域在热浪期间的一个能量交换的情况进行了对比，及其这个内部的物理机制进行了分析。这个具体的研究，如果大家感兴趣的话，我们会后可以交流。那基于我之前的一些研究成果呢，我们提出了对于武夷山国家公园进行的一个相关的研究计划。我们知道，武夷山国家公园位于江西与福建西北部两省交界处，它保存了世界同纬度带的最完整、典型、面积最大的一个中亚热带原生性的森林生态系统，也发育有明显的一个植被垂直带谱，并且福建省的夏季也常受热浪的这个侵扰，因此是延续我先前研究的一个极佳的条件场。这些图是我去年参观武夷山气候观象台。福建省国家大气环境背景值武夷山监测站拍摄的一些照片。右图是大气环境背景值武夷山监测站，它地处海拔1139米的武夷山摩天岭顶峰，主要是负责采集华东区域空气质量监测数据，为全国大气环境质量标准的制定以及大气污染物的迁移规律的研究提供了准确的背景参考。那这个是武夷山国家气候观象台以及武夷山国家公园的气象台，它是福建省唯一的国家气候观象台，也是全国首个专门为国家公园成立的气象台。它涵盖了基准的气候站、基本的气象站、高空气象观测站、国家气象观测站、雷达站，以及武夷山脉不同海拔高度、不同梯度断面的气象、水文、生态、大气成分等野外观测站，构建起了天空地一体化综合观测系统，建立数据综合处理系统，完善了气象趋利避害的服务体系。通过云计算、人工智能等的信息化手段，武夷山国家气候观测台已经可以定量的评估气象灾害、气候变化对典型的生态系统的影响，以及预警生态风险，为严守生态保护红线呢提供了一个科技的支撑。前面武夷山的科研中心张主任也提到了一个极端事件在武夷山公园也频发。那这些图呢是武夷山国家公园的平均温度的巨平图，左图是巨平图，从图中我们也可以看到1961年到2019年的平均气温异常值会呈现一个显著的一个上升的趋势，并且有明显的年代期特征，体现为96年前主要是负异常，而之后主要是正异常，并且全年平均共上升了将近1.35摄氏度，平均每10年上升0.23摄氏度。那右图从气温的垂直变化图也可以看到，随着高度的增加而降低，其中以夏季最高，冬季最低。因此，关于接下来我们的研究主要分为2方面进行。首先是基于观测数据的一个统计分析，主要分析武夷山国家公园及其周边区域极端温度对于植被生长的影响，不同的植被类型分布区域在热浪期间的一个日间的温度变化，以及相应的能量平衡过程。另一方面呢，是打算利用一个数值模型改变区域的研究区域内的一个植被类型或者是叶密集指数，检验其会对这个极端温度事件是否会发生影响。那今天就是我的报告，还有很多不完善的地方，还请各位领导和专家们批评指正，谢谢大家。
You're muted.
Thank you so much. That was great. We have one more speaker, last but not least, Guy Rodriguez from our Oregon State Parks. He is the Central Resource Manager. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you, everybody. And pleasure to spend some time with you all this evening or this morning, wherever you happen to be. Thank you for your opportunity to present and give an overview of how Oregon State Parks is integrating climate change adaptation into our park system. So it's important to recognize the purpose and current place within our organization to better understand how we're looking at climate change response. This year, Oregon State Parks celebrated its 100th year birthday. And you'll see there from our vision, we're looking to take the long view to protect Oregon's special places, which really means that we're essentially looking at our next 100 years and beyond relating to climate change integration. Quick overview on some of the things I hope to touch on tonight is a recognition of our history and Oregon's ecological diversity, along with our current challenges that we are observing in our environment, and then several focus areas and what we're working on to integrate climate change into our system. So a very quick general overview of our history. For those interested, there's more information following the YouTube link that'll show up at the bottom of the screen here. In the name of time, I'll summarize by saying Oregon, like many other states, has operated in a state of growth and overall abundance for several decades. And over the last 20 to 30 years, we've found ourselves in a state of compression with high visitation, aging infrastructure, and the effects of climate change are just amplifying those effects and taxes on our system. So Oregon, for those of you that are unfamiliar, has several distinct ecological ecoregions. I think if you count all that are on the screen there, it shows up as 9. And this is really important because each region has different demands that we're seeing and different challenges from climate change. Therefore, each one warrants a distinct targeted effort in the name of climate change response. Generally speaking, like many other places across the region, country, and world, Oregon sees many of the same challenges that you do, including intensity of wildfire storms, flooding, increased drought, environmental diseases, survivability of wildlife, and sea level rise and subsequent erosion, as well as changes to vegetation and recreation. A quick example that I thought was interesting that we saw at Prineville Reservoir. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a picture of Prineville Reservoir this last season. You'll see that there's not a whole lot of water in that reservoir because it's centrally located in this dark red dot right in the center of the state in a period of exceptional drought. So obviously that has an effect on the environment and subsequent effects on recreational opportunities.
Hi, Guy. Sorry for the interruption. I think you have a PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Yeah, on our end, we are not seeing.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Thank you for interrupting. A PowerPoint would be helpful. How is that now?
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. So one of the things that Oregon State Parks is looking at is just a full integrated strategy. The more that we can partner with our state and federal agencies, the more that we can leverage partner organizations, the more that we can engage our general public, and then also integrate all of our internal goals throughout our system, the more that we feel like we will be successful, which is essentially inevitably leads to a culture change within our organization and then everyone that we're working with to make sure that we're all having a dialogue around the effects of climate change in ways that we can leverage each other's efforts. So one of the first ways that we're looking at is just more interagency coordination, which is reactive and proactive measures. So looking at how we can partner before, during, and after emergency response events. So here's a picture of some coordination through in response to wildfires. That was challenging some of our systems from several years ago. Along with that, additional water monitoring efforts, planning, and overall management efforts around water use. Emergency management trainings or tabletop exercises and drills, and then partner agency response and overall information sharing. And then lastly is coordination through Emergency Management Center and local offices to ensure that we're responding in the most efficient manner as possible. So some operational efficiencies. This is kind of the day-to-day and short-term goals. So things like electric vehicle use and equipment, garbage and trash collection and management, reduction of irrigation and restoration of native vegetation, and then also increasing in partner organizations just to expand our capacity to be able to manage the environment more proactively. A lot of additional efforts going towards resource management, essentially doing a park by park condition assessment and developing site-specific resource management plans, considering ecological diversity, drought tolerance, fire resiliency, ecoregion migration, so essentially how the ecoregions are shifting throughout our environment, and then also the recreational values associated to the different properties that we manage and the expectations from our visitors. As far as midterm or mid-range goals, taking a hard look at park planning and design opportunities. So this has involved everything from sea level rise. This is an example of one of our coastal properties where we're looking at essentially redeveloping the entire campground and moving it farther away from the ocean or ocean shore, and utilizing space that we don't normally utilize. So this is what we're coining as a retreat strategy. So moving as much developed property to upland areas out of sea level rise. And then also this includes everything from the type of design. So more fire resilient rooftops on our buildings, hardening of structures. So utilizing more concrete or rock structures instead of wood in fire prone areas. As far as our long-term strategy, that's where we get into our property acquisition and disposition. So this is a picture of Wallowa Lake. And you'll see on the right-hand side, there's a small little rectangular image there, which is an acquisition that we're currently targeting. There's a campground at the very far end of that lake, and there's only one point of egress. So obviously in a fire situation, that would be very life-threatening. So making sure that we develop a property strategy that allows for several points of egress. Also managing areas around our reservoirs to not put more effort into less stable environments than we possibly can. And then I heard education mentioned several times this evening, finding new ways to engage the general public and a continued emphasis on climate literacy. Everyone's understanding of climate change and climate change adaptation and resiliency. We all come from different places and are at different points in our understanding. So the more we can foster more education and bring in a new wave of environmental stewards, the more effect and impact we believe we can have for our park properties. And I'd be remiss to not mention some of the protection efforts that we have to one of our greatest resources, which is our staff. So this is an example of some of the new measures that were put into place over the last few years, just to make sure that our staff and employees are protected when we experience environmental challenges, such as intense smoke from wildfires. And how we can make sure that we can equip them to continue to provide good public service and help us continue to manage the resources during times of incredible challenge. And that concludes the presentation. Sorry for the quick mishap on the earlier slides, but hope you're able to follow along well enough. And I hope you all have a great evening or morning.
Thank you, Guy. That was great. That was great. Thank you. I want to also welcome, we've had some visitors to our conference, Miss Universe of Canada, Amelia Tu. If you want to say hello to us, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thankful that I was given the opportunity to be here today because this topic of environmental sustainability and global warming is actually my platform. So I learned a lot through all of your presentations. today. It was really informative. And I'm actually having like a YouTube live discussion this coming Thursday with some other fellow delegates, I think Miss Universe USA and some other girls. So I'm definitely going to be, I took like some pictures of all the graphs. So I'm definitely going to be making data and everything I learned today. So thank you so much.
Can I add something here?
Great. Yes, of course.
Yeah, Miss Universe Canada, Amelia, she gonna be competing for Miss USA, Miss Universe in I think it's January 14th. So we have 500 million people watching on TV. This is a big globally. So we know that environmental friendly and global warming is a big topic. And it's not just city to city or country to country, it's globally, very urgently, very important. So Amelia, her platform, she wants to be ambassador to deliver all the message we learned today as well. And she is on that to deliver that message to that great audience is really something that we can change the life of everybody, every culture, because this is important, right? It's not just about we our self-care, is about everybody taking part of this. And it's very important, education, educate everybody and changing the lifestyle. I think that's important.
Thank you. And this is Carrie Yu that just spoke, and she is
manager
of the
yes,
and works with Amelia. Well, that's wonderful. We and please do spend some time on the Sustainable Development Goals, because that is something that is universal and goes with your position. 193 countries signed and endorsed this Sustainable Development Goals, and they relate to more than climate change, but we can't fight climate change if we don't fight poverty and injustice and other things. So it's a comprehensive way of approaching the problems of climate change. But that's wonderful. And do we have a way to keep in touch with you? Jen, do you have a way to keep in touch?
Email, we both have it, Jean and
okay. Okay, well, if anyone would like to keep in touch, then you can write to Jinlon. He'll give you the information so we can keep in touch. Thank you so much for coming. I would like to take one or two questions. We're a little bit over time, but this has just been fabulous, just great. We've been all over the world, almost every continent, so except South America. So are there any comments or questions that people have this evening? Okay, well, I thank everyone for coming. It was a great set of presentations, a great conference, so much diversity. So thank you again, and stay in touch. Thank you.